Representative Mark Takano is with us today, Congressman Mark Takano from California, and he is going to be on the Happy at Work podcast, which is all about positivity in the workplace, empowering workers, making people happier. And what better way to hear about a 4-day work week? Like, who doesn't want to hear about that? So, Mr. Takano, maybe you could just talk a little bit about your bill trying to make our lives easier.
Well, my bill is very simple. It is a change in the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was originally passed in the 1930s, I think 1935, around there. It was a New Deal sort of bill. It's the same bill that guaranteed a federal minimum wage, federal overtime work rule standards, and also it established the 40-hour work week. Prior to the FLSA, it was not uncommon for Americans to be working 6 days a week or more. And it was the product of several decades of activism and demands by labor unions in the private sector that the 40-hour work week came into being. And so prior to that, we didn't have a 2-day weekend. The 2-day weekend becomes something as a matter of law throughout our country after the FLSA is passed. So my bill simply amends the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and changes the 40-hour work week to 32 hours, meaning that you earn overtime pay after 32 hours of work instead of 40. It does not mandate or require that employers that they work only 32 hours. People can work more than 32 hours. If that's what employers can still do that, but it's just that to pay time and a half after 32 hours of pay. And so it's a very simple bill. We don't mess around with any of the classifications or anything like that. But I have other legislation, which now I've championed the fight for a minimum wage of nationally of $15 an hour, which still hasn't passed. Although it's interesting, the labor markets have moved in that direction since COVID. Even in restaurants and other, I mean, they've had to raise minimum salaries in the labor market, without the federal government mandating it because of labor shortages. I do have legislation which would raise the threshold for overtime pay. But the law was really quite ingeniously constructed. All these moving parts work together to try to protect workers, set minimum standards. And the 40-hour work week was revolutionary when it passed. And it's been 90 years since we instituted a 40-hour work week, but technology has changed. People have become far more productive. And I don't think it's that radical to suggest that in an advanced industrial economy such as the United States or post-industrial economy, that we ought to rethink the work week and how long we work. And we'll get into much more of that detail, I guess, in this conversation. So that's my bill. My bill is basically after 32 hours, you earn overtime pay. And I think this will have a tendency to actually set a new mindset and a new norm about how long the work week is.
I think it's so easy because it's so elegant and simple. And there's a lot of research that has come out of Iceland that you're probably familiar with, that they basically took a 40-hour wage. So you're being paid for 5 days and you're working Monday through Thursday, you're working that fourth day. And what they found is that they did have a small to moderate increase in productivity, well-being, job satisfaction, engagement, and retention. And basically the goof off time, okay, I'm going to hang out at the coffee machine, that went away, and it was more of a heads down library atmosphere. And I'm curious if you've seen that data and how you respond to that. That people are just going to be working more efficiently.
Well, actually, I'd had the bill drafted, ready to go for January of 2021. But I held off because COVID had just really taken hold in Los Angeles and had surged in the country. And we hadn't had wide vaccine distribution at that point. And I felt that the timing wasn't right, even at the early 2021. But the reports about the Iceland study came out around, I don't know, March, April, May, in the Washington Post. And then my colleague, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, tweets out the study and says, "Do you think we're ready?" I do. And I said to my team, we better get this bill out there before someone else takes the idea. I suddenly had the feeling like, instead of being afraid that we would appear out of touch, that we were in a race to sort of now make sure that that my office would be the one that would introduce it. And sure enough, when we did, it got a lot of attention, more than I expected. But my understanding is the Iceland study doesn't take it back to 32 hours. It's sort of shaved off like 4 or 5 hours, or off that. And they noticed no reduction in productivity, which also is notable. And that actually there was a kind of modest increase in productivity, is what I recall from the study.
That was it. It was modest increase, and you're right. They went to a 36-hour, but they didn't lower the wage. One thing that I'll add in, when I owned a money management firm years ago, I did a 4-day work week only because I was doing a 4-day work week and I didn't want my staff to be resentful. So what I did, which I didn't realize what a good idea it was until later, was I said, if you train your colleague to replace you on that day that you're taking off, then you can do the 3-day weekend. And so what I ended up doing is I got free cross training. And my entire staff became more capable. They could do more things because you couldn't take your day off unless someone could do your job to replace you. So the cross training was actually a benefit. And I'm not seeing that in the media, but that is a benefit that I think is worth researching.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty clear that so I'm not sure how this concept works in manufacturing, in sort of sort of professional settings where you're in financial services, in the service arena. And so, not altogether clear how this all shakes out. But, I noted that Microsoft Japan experimented for a summer and results were positive.
Very well, yeah.
That the question out there is whether or not there's some sort of, I forget the term, but there's some sort of effect that they're trying to compensate for, in terms of the employees are aware that they're on some sort of new program, and that there's a bias that's built into how they're beginning to work, which makes the study, which invalidates some of the studies. But the studies, the experiments have all been coming back with some positive results so far. But I'm encouraged by that. I'm also noting that certainly in highly skilled workforces, sectors like tech, where you have coders and software designers and chip designers and people like that who are highly sought after, there's a saturation point at which, no matter how much money you offer them, that starts to lose its attractiveness. And if you're a huge company like, say, Google or Facebook, who can offer lots of money, and you're sort of a mid-sized company that doesn't have quite as deep a pocket, you still offer lots of money to pay people. It's a competitive salary, but suddenly the 4-day work week become, time is just as valuable as, say, the compensation that's out everywhere. But now, so in the exempt, for employees that are exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act, I find that these conversations, what I'm seeing is that those conversations are most robust in those sort of labor sectors, right? In those arenas. I'm seeing it in healthcare. as well, like, highly trained doctors and pediatricians at children's hospitals. Human resources people are starting to think we need to hire more people because we're just not going to get the same amount of hours out of people. I mean, that argument may sort of offset, it may be offsetting in terms of our argument that the argument that people are just as productive, if not more. But I think there's a combination of things going on. And I would mention another thing. I think the pandemic also created a new kind of awareness and reality about the importance of how much time is valuable to people. And that the great resignation that has sort of emerged out of this this new reality that has also, I think, made people more open to increased flexibility in the workplace. That when people say, "Can I work at home at least one day a week as a condition of being hired?" That's maybe a euphemism for a reduced work week. They may not be saying I just don't want to work 5 days a week. It's sort of being verbalized as, can I just have, can we work at home for 1 day a week? And that's happening in my own community. We had a local city government call my office about what my policy was. Are we changing our policy on work at home? Because the new people they're getting, prospective hires. That's what they're asking. They're asking, can we have at least 1 day a week at home where we work at home? So I think, as I said, I kind of read that as a euphemism for like, we want at least 4 days, 1 day off at home.
So one of the themes that has emerged in the podcast while we speak with CEOs about what is their new kind of policy around work from home since the pandemic, and what's emerging as a theme is to give the employees the flexibility. You want to come into the office, you're welcome to come into the office. You want to work from home, you work from home. You decide, and when we do bring you in, it will be for community or team-oriented collaborative events. So it does seem like there's a theme emerging where employers are realizing, CEOs are realizing that they have to give some flexibility to the employee. But the other piece I'm really interested in is that along with terms like the Great Resignation that's come out of the pandemic, we also have the she session, right? So women were disproportionately affected and lost employment as a result of the pandemic. And how could you see possibly this 4-day work week helping women who might need more balance in dealing with, the household and kind of still dealing with the uncertainty of, am I homeschooling? Am I not? And, a day a week would give them that extra ability to balance and stay employed at the same time.
Well, Tessa, I'll see if I can keep my emotions sort of, even as I talk about, my mother just passed about a month ago. I just spoke at the memorial, and I recalled her going into the workforce when I was age 8. Amazing woman. And I recall that she would put a full day's work in at North High School, and I had 3 brothers. I didn't go to preschool, but my younger brothers did. And she would come home after putting a full day of work, and then come to a home that was not less than orderly home, right?
With 3 boys, I have 2 boys. I can only imagine.
She cooked dinner, and she was an amazing mom. She was the secretary who really ran the school. She emerged into that. And then after the service, one of my friends from high school who he says, that part of your eulogy really touched home with me, because my mother was doing the same thing. She was working those long hours, and he said she actually had to seek counseling. There was a time where she was needed help. Her mental health was at stake. And you think about 750 million Americans dying. A lot of them are elders. I've been meaning to ask my staff to get a breakdown of this number. That's nearly twice as many people, Americans who've died than World War II. We lost in World War II. And you think about who had to take care of, so you had women staying at home to take care of families, the children whose schools were closed down, the caregiving that had to go on to continue with the elders, the caregiving that had to go on with children, just the amount of stress and strain that was, boggles the mind. And that one, and then as we try to, as you know, the 3 million women who haven't returned to work, we think has a lot to do with the fact that we had all these childcare facilities closed down. Those businesses just couldn't survive. And it's going to take a lot to get them going again. And so that's why in the Build Back Better bill, we have put in enormous amounts of money to do what we call universal childcare. Every family will spend no more than 7% of their household income on childcare as a strategy to get childcare up and running again. But I do think when you think about women and families of a certain age, you got children, but you also got aging elders, and you're trying to balance both of them. And I know that my parents were doing both. They were taking care of kids, and as we got older, we got out of the house. There were elders, there were aunts and uncles, not just parents, that they had to also, they felt obligated to also look after. You need flexibility to go and deal with the inevitable things that happen, doctor's appointments, going in and checking in on people at the nursing home, if there is a nursing home, or people at home, the caregivers coming at home. So there's a lot of juggling that families are doing. And I think there's a lot that, frankly, government needs to step up, fulfill. I mean, this whole thing that's on the chopping block right now, or hopefully not on the chopping block, is paid family leave. My gosh, we definitely needed that during the pandemic. I mean, people might have been quarantined for 14 days. They might have had to be at home because they tested positive, or they were actually sick. There was bereavement, there was funerals, there were just a number of things that we've got. I think we've had a traumatized nation, and we may be not recognizing to the extent to which the country has been traumatized by over 750 million deaths. A lot of those people, breadwinners too.
So my question is related to this, and it's moving a little bit into economic impact. And so I was thinking before we went on the call today, what would really happen with that fifth day? So let's say we're all getting that Friday off. Well, I'm not earning money, but I'm an American consumer, so I'm probably spending some money, but I'm also, so that's a good one. But I was also wondering, maybe I'm saving some money that I'm not needing. I'm preventing I'm preventing burnout. So maybe I'm not drinking inappropriately that day and I have to go to a counselor to take care of that, or I get a DWI or something. Would there be mental health and physical benefits by the fact that I've gotten a day off and I can go to my yoga class if I want to? Do you think that perhaps healthcare costs would drop, consumer spending would go up? And you know this more than I do, but where do you think the net economic impact of this might land?
Here's where I think we don't. I think we can speculate about all the things you've said. Mm-hmm. I definitely think, and as I told the story about my mother, I mean, that was decades ago, but I think things have gotten even harder for people since then. She was at least able to put two of my brothers in preschool. The cost of that is out of whack, but I do think that the emotional stresses of life do cause people to seek stability. And they seek stability in ways that may be harmful. So drinking, alcohol, even drugs, or there's other ways in which people will try to bring themselves back to stability. and an imbalance in work and life and meeting obligations that life presents to you, that's a real problem. And I think it does express itself in stress eating, people overweight, people seeking some sort of way to stabilize. And so I do think that healthcare costs, we could actually see healthcare costs go down as people take care of themselves better. I do think that we have currently Friday night for people to go out to eat and Saturday night to go out to eat. I think Friday, an additional night, who knows? I mean, I do think that the hospitality industry will also be changed. We could see recreation also be affected. So all of those areas. That may argue against what I'm also going to put out there, but we know that the carbon emissions go down on weekends, that there's just less carbon emitted on Saturday and Sunday than the rest of the week. And so if we are able to get another day out of the week where we realize just less carbon being emitted, that's a huge benefit, in the abstract for the planet and for all of us. So we know that to be the case. We don't. So prior to the 5-day work week, the idea that you would have a Saturday off to go to market, Saturday was market day. That wasn't standard. But now that we have, an extra day off, who knows what that will mean for consumerism and commerce. And then there's another area, which is a lot of the faith community has shown up in support of our bill, which means that, they view it as another day for people to be involved in, the church and doing good works in the community. Certainly, we could notice some impact on culture in different areas of the country.
So what are some of the what is the feedback that you're getting? So it's really interesting to see how the faith community sees benefit. What are you hearing from unions and other types of employee organizations?
The AFL-CIO and several unions like the UFCW have endorsed the bill. They've actually endorsed it. I've heard from people who run big charities in my community that they would go to the 4-day work week right now if they weren't worried about what their donors would think. They're big supporters. And so there are people who feel like they could move in that direction if they could. So from, organized labor, they see it as a bill that would give more leverage to workers. And in all fairness, I think it does. I mean, we're in a labor market which is very tight. You see help wanted signs everywhere. And, like I said, we don't mandate that people work 32 hours, but for that manager who's going to make a decision, do I have the ability to actually hire an extra person to work that day so I don't give time and a half overtime on that 5th day? Or do I offer that time and a half overtime and ask that person to work that extra day? That amounts to a 10% raise, for people. I mean, it's so you can see how this is a bill that it's a legislation that actually helps workers in a tight labor market, as we have seen now. And I actually see it as the exact time where you want to actually enact something like this in a labor market which is like this, because it will have the effect of pushing compensation up for our workforce.
How soon can that get done?
Well, I don't see this happening like right away. I will tell you that we are that a major step forward is taken. The Progressive Caucus has endorsed the bill, which is we've got a huge number. I don't know, it's like 90, 100 members of the Progressive Caucus in the Congress have endorsed it. That doesn't mean every single member of the caucus is ready to vote for it, but it's a major institutional sort of move forward. And I do think we are, I do think the way it will work is I think some local governments and state governments may try to race to beat me and getting it through the Congress. And we'll see it implemented at local and state levels before we get it through the Congress. But that's, that's kind of how, advances in worker protection and workplace quality workplaces. That's how it kind of works in our country. We see it sort of move along in a hodgepodge fashion in sort of all these laboratories of democracy at the state and federal level.
And wouldn't that be good, Mark? Because then you could test it out and see if it works. So let's
That's
say
right.
you have a municipality say, hey, let's try it. Let's try it out and see. Then
Well,
you could see what works and what doesn't work.
well, I can imagine like an industry town, like where you have a mid-sized, a small town, which is dominated by a large employer. That large employer decides that this is what they're going to do. And you could measure the effects on the whole community about what it would do to the cultural life of that community, what it does to the mental health, the life of that community, what it does for the medical costs. I mean, we could start to do some controlled studies.
Have you tried that? Have you kind of reached out? Because that sounds like a brilliant idea.
I have not personally, called up a mayor or a corporation but that's, this is sort of the ideas that I'm hearing. I have conversations with advocates who, we kind of think about these things,
I was going to mention when I was at Penn, we had a really great guest speaker that was talking about blue zones, which are areas in the world where people live, like it's hyper longevity. They typically live to be over 100. And actually, there's one town in the United States, Loma Linda, California, and I believe it's because they have it's faith-based, it's Seventh-day Adventists, and it's their sense of community and their diet that's responsible for it. But the person that's doing blue zones, he actually goes around to municipalities and shows them different ways within the community that they can create better work-life balance. And he probably knows some mayors that would want to do this. I think he's already doing Naples, Florida, but I'm happy to talk to your assistant or whoever to try to make that connection. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about those endorsements. When I can see you're running a whole machine, like everything you do has like the lever up here goes down there, and so you really have to be really considerate. And it's a fun game, but it's your job. And I was just wondering if I could see the benefits of getting public health officials to endorse this, from their perspective. I could certainly see like social media influencers ripping this up. I can't imagine any worker that wouldn't want it. But who are your dream endorsers? If you could get anyone, who would you really want to back this, to say, yeah, we got to do what he wants? Who would be a dream?
I think when we start seeing major business leaders step forward, and I think it might happen in the tech sector, some major tech firm, like, it could be Google or Meta or somebody that's a recognizable sort of name, and they start to do this. And even though their employees are likely to be exempt from the FLSA, the fact it happens sort of at the kind of the prestige end of our sort of worker chain, where these are glamorous sort of jobs that are highly compensated. That's a cultural signal, a cultural tone.
There's
if you start seeing Wall Street set that example, you start seeing, I learned something when my bill was announced. There was a CNBC piece that was done right. It just came right after. It was in the can. It was obvious that they had been prepared for this moment. And actually, the title of the segment was could the market operate on 32 hours a week or something like that? And I think at one point the markets were open like for 5.5 days or something like that. And Richard Nixon at one point, campaigned in 1952 for vice president, and said that he thought that the 4-day work week was inevitability. right? I mean, so it's not exactly a new idea, but there may be a new receptivity to the idea. But I think certain leaders within the business community and certain major marquee companies, if they were like, so Kickstarter is not the size of Google, but Kickstarter has made a commitment to a 4-day work week, paying people the same and not working longer than 8 hours a day. So it's not like you're working 12 hours a day, but Kickstarter has made that commitment. And John Leland, who contacted me after he saw the bill introduced, I mean, he's leader of some sort of global movement toward a 4-day work week, right? And so, so we know that, you know, companies like Kickstarter, which has a kind of a good brand identity out there, is onto this, and I think it's refocusing. I think having people in the corporate sector do this would be really important.
Thank you. And what about obstacles? Are there any groups out there or arguments that you've heard against this where you're like, yeah, we're going to have a hard time overcoming that one? Any obstacles to this idea,
Well,
you think?
I think there's a mindset, like from people like who are controllers of companies, people who are the accountants, whose whole job is to like eke out more marginal gain. And so, you know, people who calculate how much you save by not paying people overtime and making sure you schedule people this way, schedule people in a particular way. I think that's a whole mindset. And you know, well, like it's not more than the mindset. It's all been informed by how you maximize profits out there. So I mean, it is a kind of a existing incumbent inertia that we have to overcome to do that. And I think the way, you know, you think about how they got the 40-hour work week in the first place. I mean, it was no less of a challenge then. You know, you think about the people who ran the industry titans of that age. And we still had people, you know, children working. I mean, a couple, you know, early 1900s, you still had children working, and forget about the role of women in the workplace. I mean, we certainly have made some progress, but I think this is a moment where we can take a look at making a transformational move. And I think this is wanting to happen. I know the Japanese government has established some sort of guidelines to reduce hours to even the private sector. Overworked people in Korea, South Korea. I mean, this is something that plagues a lot of nations. It affects birth rates. It affects a lot of things where you have overworked people just not starting families. They don't have enough money to start families. And they don't see when they can. You know, they're just working too hard. So, I mean, something's got to give at some point. And so I think more people talking about it, the better.
So I know we have to bring this conversation to a close here. What is your advice? You know, you've from the storytelling of your mom, thank you so much for sharing that, and kind of how you've lived your own life and your career. What is some advice you would give to employers who are trying to navigate, you know, a lot of burnout of their employees and trying to create a more positive workplace? What are some things you do, or what's some advice you would give to them?
Well, I think you need to invest in managers. You need to invest in how they manage people. I've learned something that it's, for me, a standard for me is to hardly ever lose my temper with anybody. Real important to not have anybody who within the management chain that screams at people. You want to, you know, on the Capitol Hill, we have, you know, we rely on our staff. And our staff are more valuable than anything. And to keep your staff stable, because they have a lot of knowledge, and we don't get everything done in one particular term. In Congress, we have 2 years. Keeping somebody around for several years who understands your agenda, your program, your way of thinking, that's really important. So staff stability is important, and it's always a kind of. On the other hand, in a highly competitive sort of arena like Capitol Hill, I always make clear to my staff that you don't have to sneak around if you have another opportunity. You know, if you have another opportunity, I will support you in it. I will write the recommendation, and I will make sure that you succeed. And I think you want to create a work environment where people feel nurtured, where it's it's about my interests, about what I want to get done, but I'm also curious to know what my staff is passionate about, so that we can have them work on projects that legislative projects, for example, that they really are excited about and really care about. And I've had employees who've done amazing work for me, who you let them go on a project they really care about, they produce amazing results for you. So that's the kind of positive work environment that I try to create. We were one of the first offices when the pandemic hit to go full on distance work. That we sent everybody home and said, you need to work from home. We tried. Our first instinct was to keep everybody safe and to do the right thing. And so we were one of the first offices to do that on the Hill. There are probably other things that I'm not mentioning. I mean, I have a retreat every year. I'm always interested. I've lately instituted, asking staff to make, a 5 to 10 year plan of their career, and they don't have to share. They don't have to share it with me. It's not something that they don't have to show their cards with me, but I want them to be thinking about what their current work means to their in the bigger picture for them.
I mean, honestly, in listening to you, I would summarize that as you value people. And I think in a work environment that has kind of played to the notion that everyone's replaceable, right? All people, all workers are replaceable, to know that, no, that's not true. People are valuable, and having that institutional knowledge is so valuable. I think that's really wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. And I think Michael and Jack are going to close us out.
Yeah, Mark, I was just going to say, this is so similar to the interview we did with the CEO of Aston Martin, that made sure that everyone was seen and heard that worked for him, that they were valuable, and he promoted them as much as possible. I think he called it up and out, and everyone wanted to work for him because he knew that they were going to be promoting them. But my final question is, what can we do to help you? I think this is going to be such a great benefit for Americans if this could pass. And is there anything that me, Tessa, and Jack could do to push the word in your favor? What could we actually do as
well? You work at a business school. Let's identify some business leaders who will become advocates of it.
Okay,
that's the biggest thing.
I'll give you one off the top of my head. Okay, you mentioned John Leland, and this might also give you some ammunition, because you talked about the progressives, but on the right, Leland was saying he can't compete to get the software engineers that Google could get. So he feels with a 4-day work week, he could use that as a way to attract and retain people. And that's a big thing, because now it kind of levels the playing field. So people who maybe say, hey, I'm making a lot of money as a software engineer, I don't need more, but I want a life, I have young kids, or whatever the case may be. And that's a really great selling point to bring you to Kickstarter.
That was my point I was trying to make earlier, that there's a saturation point of salary comp, of the amount of money making, after which it doesn't, what more can you do to pay somebody after you've paid them, really a lot of money? You can give them, 4-day work week. You can allow them to work from home. You can allow them to work from a low-cost state. I mean, there's a lot of things in the tech space in particular. And John's the one that gave me the idea that he says, you know, what it may take is for a big like Salesforce or Google or Meta. That's not Facebook anymore, but for just one of those, the first company that does it is going to like force everybody else to do it.
Well, I'll tell you, kid, I'll put you in touch with this guy, Ryan Breslow. He's the CEO founder, young guy for this unicorn startup fintech company. So it's like, I don't know, about $8 billion valuation. And the guy's like 12 years old. I mean, he's like 20 something. It's amazing. Okay. And he put forth a 4-day work week, and he's been doing it for a while, and it's pretty successful, and it's working. And his thing is this, you know, if you work 4 days and you give it your all, and then you have 3 days just to enjoy your life, take it easy. And so there's other folks like that too. So we'll be glad to send you over some names of people to get in touch with, because it does feel, and I don't know if you got in touch with Andrew Barnes and Charlotte Lockhart and those folks, because there's a 4-day work week movement, as you pointed out earlier, where it's definitely getting momentum and it's picking up a lot of people. Right now, there's a lot of these small and mid-sized companies that are doing it, but you could just feel the energy. It's growing. If you look on social media and Twitter, you see a lot of it popping up.
Well,
companies doing this.
You know, it's interesting. We submitted this an idea for not a workshop, but for a panel to South by Southwest, and they had closed down. It was after the submission date, and they gave me my own panel, because they anticipated this was of high interest. So definitely forward those names to my office. We'll get in touch with them, and I agree with you that I fully did not anticipate the already happening movement, and we kind of, you know, we've been dominated by the infrastructure bill here and the Build Back Better bill and all of that going on. But I sense that this is the right moment to kind of restart the conversation.
You know what it is, because you see not only a 4-day work week, but what we're seeing, you know, Tessa, Mike, and myself, we're seeing flexibility, as Tessa mentioned, the workplace, where basically companies and big companies, large companies, are saying, hey, we trust you. Come into the office if you want to, but if you don't want to, work remotely. We're going to trust your judgment. Or complete remote, like Twitter, everybody can work remote. Where, like Zillow, if you move, they're not going to cut your pay. So let's say you're in San Francisco, but move to a lower cost area, they're not going to cut your pay. They're going to keep you where you are. So we're seeing a lot of these interesting developments all coming together. So I think the timing for what you're doing is perfect, because the mindset, and we speak to a lot of people every day and interview a lot of executives. So even the executives are recognizing, in a war for talent, in a great resignation, you have to do what's right for your employees, because if you don't, you're going to lose them. And for some are money, but some is time, a day off, less hours working each week. They're all variations of a theme, but I think you're onto something. I think this is going to happen.
Thank you so much for your time today. We're really grateful for. We know you're busy. We really are grateful for the time.
Oh, this has been. Well, this is the first, major thing I've done, major, interview I've done, or participation I've done on this topic since this last legislative sort of moment that we've had, and I feel like I have enough space to try to fully resurrect this discussion, at least from my point of view. I know it's continued. I'm not the center of everything. I realize that, but I really want to thank you, Jack and Michael and Tessa, for this opportunity.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
I really appreciate it. This is awesome, and we're behind you. So we'll send over names in any way we can help out.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.